Dan from IT, do you know why it's not broadcast, or is it broadcast? Okay, maybe it is. Okay, I think it is. Good. All right, well, thank you all. Welcome. Nicole, let's see, are you on board, Nicole?
I am. I'm here. I'm sorry. I turned the camera off because I'm in my bedroom. So.
It's okay. No worries. Okay, I think we're all here. Should we get started, Alex?
Yeah, it looks like everybody's here. I'm going to hold my phone up to the camera. That'll be our flag for the Pledge of Allegiance. I'm not seeing one around here, so if you'd all join me.
Great.
Okay.
And pledge. I pledge allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic
for which it stands,
one nation,
under God,
with liberty and justice for all.
liberty and justice for all.
All right, thanks everybody. Now we're going to take our regular scheduled public comment. So if anybody has any public comment now, you can share it now. Our host for the meeting will have to, I guess, unmute you or whatever it is. If you got your hand up, I'm not quite sure how the Zoom works with that.
Okay, let's see.
Did we receive any public comment, or is there anybody in the public here that would like to say something now?
Dan at the county, did anyone submit any of the public comment through the county media page portal?
Dan is not observing this or monitoring this meeting. He assigned me. This is Rachel Serena from his department.
Oh, hi, Rachel.
Not mentioned to me anything about checking for comments for you guys. That should have been, if there's comments posted, then that should have gone directly to somebody else. I don't know who that person would have been, but it wouldn't have been. He didn't mention anything about checking for comments. He just showed me how to monitor your meeting for you. But you have no public attendees except for Tamara Layton, and she's not raising her hand. So.
Yep, I saw that. Welcome, Tamara. And she's not raising her hand. Let me see if I got any email alerts or anything about comments. I did not. Okay. All right, so we're going to assume there's not any.
Yeah, I'm not hearing any. So then with that, let's move on to item 4, approving the minutes from April 4th, 2020.
Motion to approve. Second.
Motion and a second. Any public comment on our minutes? Hearing none. Would you pull the vote? Whoever's.
Director Robert? Director Robert? Can you guys hear me?
Not very well.
Director Robert?
Director Roberts? Can you guys hear me now?
That's better.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Director Roberts?
Yes.
Director Kime?
Yes.
Director Berkowitz?
Yes.
Director Gittman?
Yes.
Chairman Fallman?
Yes. Okay. Minutes passed. Let's go to item 5, our COVID-19 virus update.
Okay, this item is going to be part an update from Chuck on operations from the First Transit perspective here at RCTA. And then also that'll segue into a short video from Dan Herron for you. So Chuck, can you give us a quick rundown on how things have been going the last month or so and any issues you're facing?
The quick answer and rundown is that things have been going fairly smooth with the reduced routes. Haven't had a lot of pushback on that. I thought we'd hear some about the Saturday. We have not heard anything about the Saturday routes not being in place. So that has gone quite smooth. As far as the drivers are concerned, the crisis bay has been very much appreciated, and it has helped add some stability to what we're doing during this time. We are in need of a couple more drivers for when we get ramped back up. I have one driver that is coming back on the 8th, one of our regular drivers that stepped out when the COVID began. And he's wanting to come back. We've got a place for him, so he'll be coming back on the 8th. And we'll continue to fill this out well, staffing wise. But we are looking to hire a couple more for when we get ramped back up and be able to do that without any gaps there. Disinfecting has been going well. They're here about 3 to 3.5 hours each evening, doing 7 buses at a time. That's how many we run each day. And we park them in the barn, and they're able to come in and disinfect them under cover. And then when they're done, usually about 9 o'clock each night, I go out and lock everything up, wrap things up for the day. So that has been going well. Also, we talked the last time about the barriers that sneeze barriers that our maintenance man was designing. He's got those in all the buses, and that's been very well received. So well received that we probably are not going to take them out when all this is over. This may become a new part of standard procedure. I'm sorry to use the phrase, but it's part of our new normal. But they have really been received well. Drivers have appreciated them and have been glad with the disinfectant and with the barriers to feel secure, taken care of, cared for. Any questions?
Chuck, when you say they, are you referring to Palm Industries?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
so just give you an update on how many times are they coming by and what the procedures, how long do they spend on each van, and just, is it working out? You're satisfied with the arrangement we've contracted with them? And,
yeah.
So
yeah, they're here Monday through Friday each evening. And like I say, it's, basically about 3 hours for the 7 buses.
Okay.
And they smell like disinfectant when I close them up at night. So
Good. Okay.
and they have a 7-point checklist that they go through with each bus each night. So if I want to, I can ask them to show me that checklist on how that's been going for each bus. But I haven't done that yet because I've been pretty pleased with what I've seen visually and when I've been out there with them.
No incidents or anything like that. No problems we should be made aware of on the buses when they're looking for one thing and discover something else.
Yeah, no, that hasn't been the case.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Any other questions for Chuck? All right, thank you, Chuck, for the First Transit operations report. We put it at the front. It just made more sense with the flow of the meeting tonight. Next up, we're going to start into our work session because we know folks have things to do this weekend, want to get going. The start of the work session, Dan Herron sends his apologies. He wasn't able to be here in real time interacting with you guys. His neighbor, I think it's an elderly couple, and he lives in the Pismo Arroyo Grande area, and they needed a ride to UCLA for a medical procedure. So he stepped up and has taken them to LA today. So he can't be with us, so he recorded this video for you guys. 1 second. Come on, technology. Don't let me down. Come on, Dan, let's have you here. Here we go.
Hello, board members. RCTA, Dan here. I have a conflict and can't be with you either in person or on Zoom today. I did want to put down some thoughts. workshop. Kind of gets you going. As somebody
I
who,
can't hear that.
Neither can I.
Is there
It's just-
Joe, do you know if there's a device on our machine to turn up our volume?
Let me check. Oops, that's not the right one. More
Here's this.
computer sound. Let's try that.
more in-depth look down the road.
He's not. It's not
Little away from
recorded
some of
very
the
loud.
immediate
I've got it
issues
on 100 on
and
mine
focusing
and on the
where
player.
you want to be in the
Can you guys hear him now?
It's hard to read a crystal ball with
It's better.
the virus problem in the air. However, we do know a couple of things. Now, one, there may be a new norm out there. We may be adjusting transit services to meet what the expectations are going to be in the future. Certainly, funding is a big issue. It's always tight, and future funding we can't be real sure of. A big portion of our revenues are linked with the economy through the sales tax, and those are hurting kind of now. The first half of 2020, we're going to see some impacts. However, the good news is on the short range, we are pretty much taken care of. The CARE Act on the feds, possibly California kicking in later on, will help offset the costs of the COVID-19 supplies, the preparation, the cleaning, some of the staffing issues. So that should be money in, money out. Short term, I think we're okay. If we take a look at some of the demand things that we might be able to predict, dial-a-ride may be down. It's certainly down right now. And for 2 years, it's been fairly low levels of service. That saves our budget money. The transit needs, the transit dependent are the ones that we really need to continue to operate for, because they're the ones that have the essential needs to get out and do grocery shopping and everything else. And they have been using our buses all the way through anyway. They're kind of a majority of our populace, our ridership anyway. We have had to do some very nimble turnarounds to respond to the fact that resources are not always out there during COVID-19, and we've made some budget changes, some service changes, some cuts that may be okay to go on, because a lot of the cuts were in times that really weren't being used that much and weren't that productive in the first place. Some of the things that we want to look at on demand is the fixed route service. We think is going to rebound. We don't know exactly when. We don't know what it's going to look like, because it's fairly unpredictable to figure out what it might be. But the transit dependent will be coming back. The disabled and elderly, we don't know. Would like to continue to be providing those kinds of services to at-risk folks, but there may be fears of safety involved with riding transit. And last year's funding picture probably can't be used as a projection for next year. Have to be fairly careful next couple of years in making sure we've got enough resources to do what we want to do. There may be new changes as people have adapted to Zoom meetings, if nothing else, and other types of things that will impact our transportation needs itself. Hopefully more people will be buying the transit fares through the internet. We would also see that there might be some restructuring of how people buy their goods, services, and even groceries, because of the possibilities of doing it more via internet. There's a lot of other minor issues, like it'll be easier to quickly get input back from people as more people are using the internet. We can foresee that down the road. The Zoom meetings are probably going to continue, and at least for training kinds of things, we're going to see more of them. Even online doctor visits may be a part of the future. If we were to take a look down the road at emphasis service areas that we want to protect, that's important too. We think that student ridership might rebound well. On the other hand, if there are fears, parent fears or student fears to the risks of possible contamination, then that may not rebound quite so quickly. We would like not to get away from, we don't want to cut off service to the elderly. We don't want to cut off to people who depend on our transit service as a lifeline. But changes are likely to happen, and we should have that in front of us as we make changes. Bus replacement is pretty important. It's not only cost effective to have newer buses, but it's safe and reliable. That's the basis of our service to the community. So, some drivers may leave because of a perceived risk balanced by fairly low wages. We can't predict that. Innovation and efficiency improvements will definitely be valued. So if we can get better at using our resources, everyone wins.
All right, thank you to Dan. Now we'll jump into our slideshow. The first few basically went with that talk that Dan gave us. Okay. Let's see if there's anything he didn't touch on in his video that's worth noting as we go through these first few. We sort of had we have this presentation broken into like 5 segments. So this was the first one. He touched on most of these points. This is, I will touch on that this is an opportunity with some service restructuring. We cut a lot of service, and we're going to get to that in the middle of this presentation, but some of it probably needs to be brought back as soon as we confidently can funding wise, but some of the others maybe not. It was maybe overdue for a hard look and a reduction. Let's see, Dan touched on these. See in this slide, Dan touched on the fact that we're already offering a smartphone-based app, so you can purchase your passes and even one-way trips on your phone. So the more contactless, the better. Looks like coming out of the COVID impacts. I think he touched on most of these. And then closing, yeah. Yep, so that's it for that part. Then I want to take you through this next section, which is kind of just a reminder of the world that our CTA and we faced as a team just, it seems like forever ago, but just like 4 months ago. So before we had heard of Wuhan or the coronavirus, we had over the last year or so a series of discussions and actions talking about how we could improve our service. And one of those things that we had explained is that now and into the future, we're spending down the last of a one-time, actually from 2016, but it's one-time funding that was helping us a great deal to provide our local match for our capital projects. And that was the Prop 1B PT MISEA fund that luckily when I got here in 2016 and most of this board got seated, we were sitting on a pretty large balance that had accumulated over time, but that's nearly all spent now on local match for our buses. And we've done a few. The fleet was in such disarray 4 years ago that we had to order 4 buses using 100% PTI. So that's been about half of it. So now we project to expire, those funds will expire in about 2 years when we pay the local match on the 3 batches of buses that we've just come into this year. So we're down to the last nitty gritty on that fund. So we're going to need to find a new way to fund our local match for bus replacements or any other capital projects for that matter. And the projections that we come up with to talk with you about is we probably need, just for a minimal amount of capital money to do our bus replacements and have a little bit of money to seek grants for our facilities and our bus stops, we probably need to set aside about $50,000 a year in 2020 or 2020 dollars in order to meet our capital shortfall. Where can we find this 50,000? Glad you asked. It's the most important question. The administration's already ultra lean. We're going to touch on it a little bit towards the end of today's presentation, but we're going to be going to, or the board has an opportunity to either continue the current model and go to a new request for proposals that my firm and others can bid on. Or you could change the model completely, which would be a bigger lift, but that decision's coming up in the next few months. And today is the end of May. So our contract, the Heron TMTP contract that provides you with general manager duties, it expires in 13 months. So it's June 30th of 21. So in order to have a new contract with us, hopefully, or a new consultant team in place, we'll need to have that procurement wrapped up by the spring of next year. So we'll be working on that in the winter. So there's not much, I mean, might be a little money to be saved there, but not much. The operations contractor staffing, which is Chuck and his team, they're already very lean. As you saw when we lost just 3 drivers in a hurry when the pandemic began here, we don't have a lot of extra bodies at all to move around. So there's no positions really that we could cut out without impacting our service quality. We did cut half of an FTE that was in maintenance prior to 2017. It used to be a 1.5 person position back there in the shop. But when Nick came in, not only is he amazing, but his pay rate was quite a bit higher. So that half position got removed, and Nick does it all himself, and luckily he's uber talented, so that works. But there's just no further positions that we would advise cutting in operations either, so we can't save the money there. So that really leaves freeing up funds for the capital, and any increase to labor costs that we want to implement, we need to find that by reducing service. We touched on the capital going forward. The only local match source we have for projects after we spend the last of this Prop 1B PT MISEA is the SB1 State of Good Repair Program. That started about 2-3 years ago. We've been using it for bus stop projects ever since its inception, and we get about $30,000 a year. So it's a good amount for bus stops. However, it's inadequate for local match for buses because they're usually 20% of a bus. Most of our buses cost about $175,000 a piece. So you can do the math. The local match on just one of those buses would be a little bit more than our annual allocation from the SGR SB1 funds. So it's about almost enough to match for one bus. And with 12 buses with 6-year lives, we need to replace on average 2 buses per year. So you can see that's where the shortfall begins. Figuring we need another 30,000, at least maybe 40 to cover bus replacements each year, the local match for, plus a little bit for facilities or bus stop projects. Figures we need at least to set aside, to be prudent, would be to set aside 50,000 a year in the future for capital. Simple trade-off. We maximize the life cycle of our fleet, but aging buses require more maintenance costs, more parts costs, and maintenance time. So it's a trade-off, and the more we fall behind on replacing buses, the more pressure and costs get piled onto maintenance. So then we wanted to shift gears a little. The other half of this sort of portion of what we want to do versus what we can do right now is increased labor costs. The board's expressed interest in seeing our drivers' wages augmented and increased. We've had a couple sessions in the last 2 years about this. At board's direction, we asked First Transit to put a proposal together about a year or so ago. They did that about what it would cost to do an intervention on the wages. But then we run into this situation in general where Caltrans controls our rural funding because they're the intermediary on the FTA money, the Federal Transit Administration money. So it's not going to be that easy to just give a wage increase. My predecessor tried that 5 years ago and Caltrans rejected it. And some of you that were on the board 3-4 years ago might recall it was kind of an ugly little scene. We almost had to pay money back. So that's going to be tricky. So the best way to do that would be at the new contract. So our current operations contract ends at the end of calendar year 2021. That's the 5th year of the 5-year base contract with First Transit. So that would be the ideal window to try to make the wage intervention that we've talked about. What do our drivers currently make? The minimum wage in the state of California is at $13 an hour in 2020. It's going to increase to $14 next year and then capping at $15 an hour starting in January of 2022. Our drivers, I think one of these slides sort of had it, but our model's been built basically on the drivers making around minimum wage. It's been that way forever here. And there's there's positives of that, and then there's negatives. The positives, we were build ourselves up probably larger than expected as far as the amount of service hours provided because our labor costs were so low. But on the downside, it must have been on the last slide. Anyhow, the downside of that is
talking about wages. Can I interrupt you just for a second?
Sure.
Yeah. Because I know you're going to be moving on. I want to kind of dwell on this a little bit. Chuck, are you still there? Is Chuck there? Okay.
I'm here.
Okay. So the purpose of offering this incentive wage during this COVID era we live in was to attract more drivers. Are we not doing that? I'm a little confused on what we can and cannot do to, of course, prevent turnover, which I heard you say, Chuck, that we have 2 openings and they're coming back. But the idea was to incentivize those who are working in this environment during the COVID crisis. Now, did I miss something, or did something change between the last time we had this discussion and where we are right now? Joe or Chuck, please enlighten me.
Well, part of the challenge that we've had with hiring during this COVID was the DMV being shut down and being unable to hire anybody and get them, a permit to drive so that we can train them out on the road. As of yesterday, the DMV is now open in Eureka. It's been open in Reading for a couple of weeks. So that's not a barrier anymore. We can get to Eureka and get a driver with a permit so we can get them going. So we have ramped back up our advertising and recruiting efforts since that barrier's been taken down. But that's been more the barrier for us to be able to hire than has been the wages. But the wages have helped us to stabilize the driving force that we have.
So Chuck, the Crescent City DMV is not opening at this time?
I have not received any word about when it's going to open.
Okay. Joe, we follow up and find out if we have a timetable when the Crescent City DMV will open up? Maybe get back to the board via email? Because I think we want to remove all obstacles to get drivers up and running, and we don't have a turnover problem. And I thought money was going to be the answer. Apparently that's not the answer. So I'm open for any suggestions.
Well, it's certainly part of the answer. But yeah, the not being able to get new drivers. If somebody had come in licensed up and ready to go, I could have put them to work right away, but nobody came in that way. But just having it open in Eureka gives us the ability to get somebody with a permit, but obviously having it here in Crescent City would be much better.
Okay, thanks for the clarification. And Joe, sorry for interrupting. I just wanted to get on that while you were talking about it.
No worries. Thank you, Roger. So going back to, we talked a little bit earlier about the main tool in order to free up funding annually to use towards capital projects was to reduce service, and by how much. So this slide talks a little bit about that. Coming into the COVID, our marginal cost per hour, which is not our fully loaded cost, but it's the actual cost when we change service. So it's your first transit labor rate plus fuel, plus a little contingency, is $40 an hour. Coming out of the COVID, it's going to be a little higher than that, probably like 45, because now we have the crisis pay and the cleaning, the disinfecting and cleaning contract. That adds a little bit to our cost, but I do believe well worth cost. So when you look at coming out of that, the cut of the magnitude we made on April 6th, when we were right in the heart of the pandemic hitting the county, that cut was a little more than we probably need to permanently free up funds. Assuming the economy comes back, that's always going to be an assumption that's not safe to make. Eventually it will, but we don't know over what time period between now and full recovery. But it's likely, we project that we probably cut a little more than we need to. That would be optimal coming out of this. The cut was about 6,000 plus annual hours. And it looks like in order to save the 100,000 that we need, we probably only needed to cut about 3,000 or 3,500. So we can probably look at some options to reinstate some stuff should the health of the county and the economy continue to go in the right direction. But we want to be cautious because there's no guarantees on the COVID. It's a very elusive pandemic to figure out. This slide just looks at the trade-offs. So we've been at the bottom of the pay scale for our history as an employer here at RCTA. Well, our contractors have been. And the symptoms of this are, as we've discussed, morale, higher training costs, constant turnover, customer service issues. So if we are able to set aside some money to allow our labor cost to increase, we're going to have a more stable workforce. And that should be seen in a better quality service to the public. Just not so many units of it. So less units of service, but of a higher quality. And the crisis pay, as Chuck said, has been so well received. I'm so glad to see the people. This is my first visit to town since this all started, and every driver has been thankful of that, and they wanted to pass that along to you guys. So what about the crisis level pay? One thought is that we could talk about is what about, we didn't put an end on it necessarily, and it is eligible for the CARES Act reimbursement. So that's one thing we could do, is leave that in place for a while. What we'd like to get a discussion going with the board is, what do you guys think the the RCTA average driver pay scale should be. What's appropriate is a differential above the minimum wage, because that's going to keep for 2 more years. It's going to go up, and then it's going to cap for a while at 15 per hour. So what should our average driver pay be? Should it be, minimum +2, +3, +5, which should be $20 an hour? So that's an interest. I'd like to hear you guys' take on that. I don't know if Chuck, this is a quiz for Chuck. I should have prepared him for this. Do you know what's your current average driver wage hourly point is at, Chuck? It's probably kind of a convoluted calculation, but it includes all the employees, senior to new.
Yeah, give me a couple minutes. I can have that for you.
Okay, I'll let you work on that while we talk. This might be the last. Yeah, so this is the concluding slide of this section, in that if we were able to set aside about $100,000 a year, which would be $50,000 towards capital, and say, for example, $50,000 towards wage hikes, which would be enough to cover probably midway in the range between $2 and $5 an hour above the current rate, we might be able to address both of those goals. And the mechanism to do that would be only bring back the most productive service that we removed last month, and be careful bringing it back so that we save ourselves enough of our funding capacity so that we're able to meet those needs for capital projects and for labor cost increases. So any thoughts on, I'll go back on the question about what should our target average per hour pay rate for our drivers be? Anyone want to chime in on that?
Well, yeah, I do. I still have that same position, Joe, that I'd like to incentivize our drivers, and likewise our personnel in general. And if we have the money, I'd like to see it spent in offering and qualifying. I'd like to see us have a backlog of drivers wanting to go forward with us, instead of scrimping and hoping someone will respond. So if that means raising wages, I just need to hear from you. Do we have the money in our reserves to support this kind of action? Chuck's comments to me several meetings back was impressed me enough to say this is an important part of operations. We're abysmally paying our staff low wages, and we need to do something about it. Now, you can't do everything overnight, but certainly we can move in the direction, if we have the money, and that's a big if, of incentivizing drivers and mechanics to come work for RCTA. And if that's the case, then you need to give us direction on what kind of impact that'll have on our budget and / our reserves, which I think I always ask you about anyway. What's the status of our reserves? So that's my thinking on it.
Okay. Other directors?
I'm thinking that with the minimum wage plus $2, and then we have a contract coming up on January 22. How is an increase now going to affect the wage that we're going to have in 2022?
Good question. So I think the thought would be, this is how I'd like to play it out. So I'm going to play my ace in the hole right now. If we were to extend the crisis pay until the period of time where the bidders are bidding, so let's say about a year or so, a little bit more than a year maybe from now, then that would be the pay scale that all bidders on the new contract would have to bid with that in mind. So as a starting point, so that way, that would be the $2 an hour. So the reimbursable crisis pay of $2 an hour that we just implemented in April. If one strategy would be just to leave that in place until this time or a little later later next year, probably late summer, fall, when the bidding would occur in 2021. And then all the wage scale would only go up from there. So that way, that would be the one-time intervention that has a pretty good chance of getting approved through Caltrans and happen. That would be my strategy, my preferred strategy, but I want to hear from you guys.
Feedback on that, guys?
Yeah, I think that's good sound thinking, Joe. I'm on board with that.
Yeah, it sounds really good to me. And you said that that $2 an hour is actually refundable.
Yeah, it's a reimbursable under the CARES Act. We have to carefully word our amendment that you'll be in front of you 3 weeks. But yes, we will include it in there in that amendment. And then the things that can be reimbursed with that one-time economic recovery CARES Act money, we can reimburse our lot. The most important thing, even more important than wages, the most important thing is we can reimburse our lost sales tax revenue. Because we normally, our lifeblood is about $60,000 a month in sales tax revenue, and that has fallen off the table, of course, in the last 3 months. So we've probably lost 15 or 20,000 per month of that the last couple months. Hopefully that starts to come out of that now that the reopenings are beginning. But anyway, that loss is going to pile up, so we can reimburse all of that, as well as our actuals because of the COVID, which would be like the crisis pay, for example, the contract for the disinfectant deep cleanings, there's one other thing I'm forgetting. We can even the capital costs of the sneeze guard barriers and Nick's labor, because Nick I just found this out a few minutes ago before the meeting started, but Nick put like 100 hours into that. Obviously designing and making those things and installing them from scratch, that was a lot of work. So that'll all be reimbursable under CARES Act, as I'm told.
Any other comments for this slide or questions from anybody? I think we can keep moving.
Okay, thank you, Alex. And the next section that we want to talk about, so that was the picture before COVID, and then COVID came. So now we have some service planning to do. That's why we always have the workshop in April or May every year, so that we can get ready for our service plan. We usually do our service changes either in July or August for each year. So looking at this fall, this is going to be a weird one. We have some at-risk rider groups that might be a little bit reluctant to come back right away, or their demand might just be down. If folks, for example, if HSU and College of the Redwoods are offering most of their classes in the fall semester, for example, under a distance learning format, then there's less reason to take the bus to school.
College of the Redwoods is having a distance learning.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. And it sounds like HSU is looking at a lot of distance learning too. I met with the school district today, and it's unclear how the high school and middle schools are going to handle it, but hopefully we'll know more as the summer goes on. Did somebody comment? I thought I heard something. Okay, we'll continue on. So market, one of the things I wanted to pound home or talk about on this slide is that the market trust and the cleanliness of our riding experience is going to be really important in marketing our way back to normal, especially with our young students that we were just starting to make hay with in year one of working with the high schoolers, and then then the COVID ended their school year early. But I think with those groups and the seniors that are maybe concerned about catching the coronavirus, I think the fact that we're doing the extra cleanings has such intangible benefits for us. So I think we should probably look at continuing that a little bit longer than we originally planned for as well. Any thoughts on that? Because the next bullet's actually unrelated. It's kind of a weird bridge. Any more thought? Anyone want to talk about the cleaning contract? I think we have it open-ended, so it'll continue to renew until one party or the other decides they don't want to do it anymore. So we have the ability to keep it up as long as we want.
it's incredibly expensive.
It is.
And certainly once we reach a point of understanding this virus a little better, I'm in full support of cleaning the buses, I assure you. But we might, I don't know, skip a day. You know what I'm saying? Just kind of reduce the amount of cleaning. And then part of the driver's responsibility would be doing some cleaning of their own vehicle when their shift is over.
Yeah, that's very, very true and realistic. We could sort of reduce it on in intervals, kind of, yeah, ratchet it down gradually, and then return the drivers to a more active role in the cleaning. And maybe by that time, remember last month's idea of looking at the community service folks, maybe by that time that program will be back up and we can get some help there. Anything else on the cleaning contract? I'm looking forward to meeting these guys tonight. This is going to be
Well,
the first night that they're here.
one of the things that we were doing is working with the high school and having, like a junior or senior student would come out and clean buses and do, just odd stuff. Has anybody, or I know Fernando's familiar with it. So that program that we had, and that helped reduce the cost a lot. And our drivers were responsible. I mean, we used to have to clean our buses at the end of our shift. That was part of our duties.
Chuck, do you want to, I mean, it still is technically part of their duties.
Yeah,
It was just due to the COVID, it became such an important and huge task that we wanted to intervene and help. Chuck, do you want to respond to the deal with the student work study program?
Well, I don't know what the previous permissions were, but the challenge I have is hiring or having anyone on the property working for us that's under 21. So that's been the hurdle that I've been facing with that. Also, yeah, the drivers are still responsible to sweep and mop if necessary, and clean up, empty the garbage out of their bus at the end of each shift.
Okay, thank you, Chuck. So it sounds like there's maybe a first transit. That's one of the things when you privatize an operation, it becomes a shared control. So a lot of things we want to do, we need to have first transit on board for, as you know, so I'm preaching to the choir there. But so that might be what's happened with the high scores. Maybe you have to be 21 now per first transit policy. I wanted to shift gears just slightly here and talk about Caltrans's recent decision to stop funding our free fares program. So we had we'd been using the LC top funds, and we'd gotten 3 years worth of allocations for that program. And we ramped it up slowly. We started with just a small partnership with College of the Redwoods, and then it grew to the point where last year we had the high schools involved, veterans, both the university and the College of the Redwoods. So the program was just starting to hit stride, but we grew it slowly. And then sure enough, Caltrans decides this year that they're not going to fund a 4th year of it. So they told us to have another project, which we scrambled, and we ended up submitting the bus electrification project to them, and they liked that, although there's an issue or two there. But so that left us with basically what's our current balance in this LC top account, and what do we do with the free fares program. So the balance is about 60,000 that we have left, and that'll be as of the end of this year. So we just did those calculations recently since the COVID hit. So that's enough to put it in perspective. We've been spending it down at a rate of about 30 or 35,000 a year in the last couple of years. Because as the program goes, the grant gets spent faster because it's basically to reimburse ridership and to pay for our advertising on the buses that promotes it. So we spent about 35 on it this fiscal year that we're currently in, and it's almost over. So if we kept that pace up, we'd have enough to do one full year for sure, and then maybe an abbreviated second year, 2 years from now, and then the funding would be exhausted. So that's pretty good. We have at least we have enough money in the account to ramp it down in a soft landing manner. Let's see if there's any more on that. Yeah. Okay. So we covered these. Oh yeah, here's where we talk about our free fares program. Caltrans rejected the 4th year of it, and they wanted the electric bus infrastructure project, which they are going to fund, I'm told. So we're going to end up needing 3 years. We've already told them that because the amount of money we get's like 50,000 a year. So we'll probably need at least 3 years worth to deliver any electric bus infrastructure, and they're aware of that. So we left a $60,000 balance in LC top that we can still use for our free fares for another year or two. Staff recommends that we officially extend the program for a year, and then we can look at it again next spring, see how much is left, and if we have enough for another full year, or maybe that last year we do like a half fare to try to wean folks off of it a little bit slowly. So that's my recommendation on that program. I'd like to hear what you guys think about it, what we should do.
Okay. Questions from the board members or comments about free fares?
Just have to get the word out.
Yeah.
Engagement. Nobody knows about this program.
Yep, I agree.
Bob, I'm seeing a hand up. Did you have something to say or no?
I don't really have anything to contribute. Or you make sense, Joe. I mean, if I'm nodding in approval. So, keep up doing what you're doing. And
Okay. All right, so we'll go ahead and plan
I don't really have
on.
anything that's that I can say, no, I don't agree with this or don't agree with that. We have to operate within a budget. We have to operate prioritizing that budget. And you've done a good job in keeping this commissioner abreast of what's going on. So that's all I can ask of you.
Thank you.
Great.
So does that 60,000, Joe, have to be spent on the free fares program, or could we reallocate it now? Because if people aren't really using it and we're going to have to phase it out in a couple of years anyways, would it be possible to start using the money for something different now and have an earlier phase out?
We can check on that. It'll probably require some sort of at least administrative amendment with Caltrans because they're really picky about these things, but it's possible. So if the board wants me to, we can have that conversation with them. I think personally that the free fares program I was livid when Caltrans said no this year. Not that we don't want to start the electric bus. We had just gotten to the point where we're starting to attract the high school rider and maybe a handful of middle school. So I really want to see another year or two of that before. I'm afraid if we pull, it's almost like fishing. I think if we pull the line out of the water now, we're not going to catch the fish. We need to have 1 or 2 good years with the students with it free, because nothing attracts like free. And then after that, I think, right, we can probably transition students into paying a little bit, and then the program will have really been successful. So I can look and I can ask them how difficult it would be to amend it. What were you thinking? I mean, they're pretty particular. Any project has to pass through an air quality criteria and matrix. So what the electric bus project did, were you thinking to ask them about allocating some of this to that future electric bus project, or what?
Potentially that, or anything else that might qualify under this. I mean, I know our home base redesign really hasn't started yet. So if that maybe moved along with this project, that could be worthwhile. But, I mean, I'm just one of the 5 and just throwing the idea out there because I'm not particularly married to reallocating that money myself. Just curious, really, if that's worthwhile to do and if possible. But if it sounds like it's going to be too heavy of a bureaucratic lift to even consider reallocating, then I don't know if I'm comfortable asking you to make that lift.
Well, I think we can ask them. We're in communication with them every so often. And plus, Dan uses his silver tongue to charm them. So yeah, we can have Dan ask them what they would feel about an reallocation. It might not be that big a deal. We won't know till we ask.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll bring that back in June and let you know what they say on that. So go into service reinstatement then. So we simplify things all the way. So we cut probably more than we needed to. Our goal was to make sure we had enough drivers to fill every shift and be reliable. So in April, we cut a little deeper than I probably wanted to. 6,000 plus annual hours when you pencil out everything that was removed. If you look, and earlier we walked through how much would we need to cut in order to create buffer room for us to have money for capital projects and for labor costs that in the range that we want them to be. And that was about 100,000. So the difference is we could probably bring back maybe about half of what we cut in April. So the question is kind of like, how fast do we bring it back? How confident we are that the COVID's been, the curve's been flattened and the COVID's maybe receding or at least stabilized. And then what happens in the fall, winter, where some of the medical folks are saying that there's a real threat that it comes back. So with all those variables, what do we do? So the April cuts targeted the lowest performing services in general. Otherwise, we would not have offered them to you. So for example, on our regional services, we cut one round trip out of the Route 199 each day, which is the one out to Gasky. And we cut one round trip out of the Route 20 going to Arcata and one out of the Route 20 north leg that goes to Smith River. So we left the rest. So the system's still functional, but it's not as many offerings. So certainly it's, we'd love to offer unbelievable 2-minute headways on every route. We just have nowhere near the funding for that. So then we need to think about if we assume the funding will return to the pre-COVID levels, even by 2021, for example, we should be in good shape. It's hard to predict. It might take longer than that.
Joe,
so
before you
yes, sir.
before we run through the rest of these numbers, how many service hours did cutting Saturday service altogether save us? Or I guess a better question would be like, what portion of those 6,000 hours were cut was just the Saturday service hours?
I'm going to ballpark this. It's in the range of 2,000 hours were Saturday. So if we just bring Saturday back, that's most of our for quote unquote budget. If we have about 3,000 we can reinstate, Saturday would be most of that, but not all. I think there'd be room for a little bit beyond that.
Okay, thank you.
No, you're welcome. That's a very good question. So here's what we cut. So we cut all Saturdays. This was on effective April 6th. We cut the last weekday hour of our Crescent City local routes, so that we now end at 6 o'clock. Obviously, dial ride goes at the same time as local by law, so we cut the last hour of dial ride between 6 and 7 p.m. One afternoon trip, as I mentioned, of Route 199. The late morning trip, which was the newest trip of the Arcata runs. This is the one that was around midnight. It was a late night trip for many years, then we reallocated to midday a couple years ago. And then the last evening trips on the Route 20 between Crescent City and Smith River and Crescent City and Klamath. So we basically shut our service down earlier at night and we got rid of Saturdays. So reinstatement wise, we developed three discussion level options here. Our recommended approach is kind of the middle one, the middling one. That would be to continue augmenting our product for the bell times with the students, because I really think we're not where we want to be with them yet. There's a potentially great market for this transit agency if everything falls for us. So I'd like to add a few hours for a morning route 300. Last year, we just ran the 300 in the afternoon after school. So that's basically a little route that runs 1 or 2 trips. It's meant specifically to serve the students. Usually highly productive once it's established because, you know, the kids have to be at school by the bell. Then reinstating Saturday service on all but Route 199 ridership is so bad, there's no reason to bring that back on Saturday, especially this summer with the tourist season probably impacted by the COVID. Maybe 199 could be a seasonal 6-day-a-week service in future years. I think that's an idea. If we could afford it, I'd like to try that. So that's the recommended approach. So we would augment our weekday morning service to better build the student market. And then we would reinstate the lost Saturday service that we just cut a couple months ago. A more cautious approach would be just doing the student service in the morning. We're talking about probably a couple hours a day. So it would be a reinstate, and that's only on school days. So we're probably talking about 400 hours or less for that morning 300, and just do that and defer everything else. I think that's maybe overly cautious, especially in light of we have the CARES Act funds to backfill our damaged sales tax that should at least give us a year or two worth. So I think maybe that's too cautious, but I wanted to throw it out there. Excuse me. Then an aggressive approach would be to reinstate more stuff this summer. So it'd be the morning route 300 that I just described, the Saturday services, plus the midday route 20 trip down to Arcata and get it back to 3 trips a day. And then we reduced PM trip out to Gasky so we could restore that. But I think that might be overly aggressive considering the uncertain funding and uncertain impacts of this virus that there's still no vaccine for, and they're still concerned. So those are kind of the 3 tracks. I want to hear you guys' thoughts on that.
Throw it out to the board.
Joe, I hear what you're saying about the recommended approach. I'm going to speak to the cautious approach, and here's why. We have so many uncertainties right now with this virus. We're already into the summer months, and you already know the events that have been canceled or not going to happen. I see the cautious approach as the way to go on this. And if it changes and I'm wrong, then we can always have a meeting and change it. But if you're asking me my opinion, I would go with cautious approach.
That's exactly what we're doing. We want your opinion. That's very, very good point, Roger.
Joe,
Yeah.
somebody needs to read Tamara Layton's comment into the record. Did you see that? She commented in the chat.
Yeah,
No.
I saw Tamara Layton's comment in the record. So when we get to public comment on the item, I'd invite Ms. Layton and anybody else in the public to add those comments. But the way that I've seen the meetings run so far is that comments in the chats aren't considered part of the actual public record. So although since Tamara did make a comment and we're just about a little over halfway through with our presentation, I'd be comfortable with breaking a little bit for some public comment. If everybody else is okay with that, because I want to invite Director Layton to actually share on the record.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing the screen so you won't see the presentation. We'll see Tamara's comment up.
Okay.
Okay, here it is. Okay, Tamara has, I'll go ahead and read it. Thank you, Tamara. Excellent point. Tamara says the cutting and restoring and then cutting again of services can be more damaging than keeping the cuts until we have more stability. Consider keeping the cuts until we have more certainty. Getting those customers back is difficult and likely will not happen.
Yeah. While we're here taking this quick break, are there any other members of the public who would like to contribute now? I'm not sure who else is in the chat with us or in the meeting with us. Okay.
I think Tamara is showing as the only attendee, which should be outside of our group. Yeah, just Tamara. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I do have a question. I was just wondering what the ridership has been since we had the cuts in services.
I think it's been, Chuck, can you look that up real quick? I think it's been pretty stable in the 150 to 175 range.
Yeah, that's correct.
So we
So-
lost about 60% of our riders real quick when the shutdown came. And then we stabilized right around that 40% of the old ridership daily.
Yeah,
Since then.
once we reinstated the fares, that's pretty much where it stabilized at.
Okay, I was
It's
curious.
always real heavy on Mondays and Fridays, but very few during the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Yeah, and I very much agree with Tamara that it would be very confusing for riders if we, bring back a lot of services and then have to reduce them again.
Yeah, it's like a roller coaster. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, for me, I'm still worried about this second wave that may or may not be coming. I mean, the way that we know that viruses and infections typically behave is that if you're, around and infecting people, then people will get infected. I don't want our buses to become a vector to spread infections in September, and then we have to shut down even more services than what we already might have had to shut down if things were bad statewide. My only other question besides that, or comments besides that, would be to ask about what's going on regionally to our neighbors, how they're responding, how their services are reopening or not reopening. I've been advocating for a regional response to this as much as possible. So, I mean, if we're working in conjunction with our partners to the south and to the north, mainly more to the south though, then that's what I prefer. So at this point, cautious approach is what I'd go with. I don't want to have to cut things. I don't want to have to cut even more things in addition to what we might have to cut in, say, September or October.
Yeah, I agree with both Roger and Alex. This cautious approach is best because we just don't know what the future is going to bring.
Well, I agree. Well, thank you guys. It's I'm so glad to get solid feedback on this because this is really it's a strategic decision. And you're right. And Tamara is right. Thank you for weighing in. It's so destructive to the transit, especially the transit dependent ridership, to have the service come and go. And that's why we wanted to build reserves, and we have been building reserves. So worst case scenario, if we go cautious and things recover quicker, one, we could maybe do a January service change and add some stuff back, by then, if we think the coast is relatively clear. Yeah, no, that's very good points taken. Thank you.
Well, yeah, I mean, I want to speak to that a little bit more. I mean, I'm the board chair, and I sometimes have trouble keeping up with what routes are going and not going. The average person that isn't living and breathing RCTA, that doesn't come to the meetings and read the agenda packets, I mean, I can't even begin to imagine the level of confusion that they're going to have with this, on top of all the other uncertainties that they're dealing with right now. So yeah, I want to just be certain with what we're going to do. I want to be consistent, because really that's what we're here to do, is provide a consistent service to people.
Makes sense. And another thing that supports the cautious approach, I didn't put it in the slides, but it just dawned on me. As I understand it, there's not going to be a expenditure time limit constraint on the CARES Act funds. So if it takes us 3 or 4 years to fully expend them all, I think that's fine. So it's not like we use it or lose it within a year. So that would also support being cautious. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a feeling this is going to be on Congress's radar and the state legislature's radar for many years to come, and that it's not just going to be we passed a bill in 2020, so we're all good kind of deal. Or at least I very much hope that that's not what our elected officials are thinking down in Sacramento and DC. Okay.
I agree. Okay. Are we ready to move on? Any other discussion on the reinstatement strategy? Okay, so I will when we get together next, we'll have it'll probably be an informational item in June 22nd when we get together next, but we'll start going down the cautious approach and just focus on building that student market that we think could be so lucrative for us in the long run, and probably not plan on bringing back Saturday too quick. Okay, so that was actually, we're on the downhill slide, folks. Hang in there. So we're getting there. This is the fourth leg of the 5-part workshop. It's mainly just reminders that we have a couple big contracts coming up, and we touched on them both earlier in the presentation. The RCTA admin contract expires June 30th, 21. No further extensions are needed per Autumn Luna. We're about to start the second year of 2-year extension in July. So we'll need a new RFP. So I will reach out to Autumn in plenty of time so she can plan her work, because my firm's going to be bidding on this thing. Autumn's got to take a big role. But one thing we are going to do is look at weaknesses in the RFP 5 years ago, things that were confusing, to make sure we have the best document possible now that I've had a chance to sit in the seat for 5 years. So we'll work with Autumn on that. The only thing I would ask you guys is, if you want to change the model, for example, I'm not sure, none of us in this Zoom were probably here when they decided on the current model of using a consultant part-time. If you wanted to change the model, this is the time to do it. Obviously, the cleanest time would be between contracts, but there'd be a lot of work to do to explore what that would look like. I think that, the main alternative would be to hire a position and have it either housed within one of our partners, the city or the county, and then they'd just be in charge of managing the transit system. It would be probably a full-time benefited CalPERS position, but then that person would need to live close or relocate to town, to the area, in order to be on site 5 days a week, or 4 tens, or whatever the full-time configuration looked like. Although, maybe, as Dan Heron said in his video, or maybe in the new normal, maybe telecommuting, maybe they wouldn't have to live here, but I can't imagine that they wouldn't. I think if you go down that way, you would want the person to reside in the community. I think your costs are going to be about the same. Looking at an annualized cost, the difference is you get more hours out of the full-time employee, but my prediction is you wouldn't get nearly as experienced employee that's been managing transit like Dan and I have been for several decades. So it would be a trade-off. You'd probably get someone that would be learning on the fly, learning on the job, but you'd have more of them. So unless there's indication now, let's talk about that. But if you don't want to go down that, we'll just plan on another 5-year contract with another RFP. What does the board think?
How common is our model across other jurisdictions? Is it typically more seen maybe with smaller areas, or just how common is that?
It is more seen in small areas, and it's pretty uncommon. I mean, there are a lot of models out there, but ours is pretty unique. Everybody does things differently though, so there's no right or wrong way to do it. Ours is fairly unique. There's not too many consultants that manage transit agencies in California on a part-time basis. There's folks that come in like on an interim between CEOs or something, between GMs. But yeah, no, I think our model is fairly unique, but our situation's fairly unique. We're very small. So that's probably what led prior boards. Sorry about this. I don't know how to shut it off. It'll just run its course. But I'm guessing the thought in the early days was, let's get a consultant in here, and that was Mark Wall, and he helped get the system started. Then they just kind of evolved from there and have him go ahead and run it on a part-time basis. Yeah, it's a little bit of a unique model, but it's not, I'm sure if we looked hard enough, we'll find some other examples that are similar, but it's not the majority. A lot of folks are, for example, to our south, so to the north, it's a very interesting model with ODOT, with Southwest Point. I don't know that someone within ODOT manages the contracts, but I think they actually really are autonomous out of Klamath Falls. I forget the name of the shuttle company that provides all the labor there for Curry Transit. But so that's that shows it one example of how the models differ. That's kind of like a very privatized model where they don't even have anyone assigned locally to really manage the contractor. Then to the south of us, Trinity Transit, they're very small like us. They're county employees, even their operators are. So I mean, they're totally what you would call in-house.
Yeah.
And then at Humboldt Transit, HTA, Greg Pratt, so that they're similar to us in one way in that they have folks like me that are paid staff, except they're employees. So they have maybe a half dozen folks in the office that, and then all their drivers are also in-house. So every model is a little different, and ours is definitely unique.
Okay. I have a question. I guess I'm not quite sure how to phrase it. It's based around the needs of the organization. Do you think, either you, Joe or Chuck, think that there needs to be more management time? Like, Joe, do you feel like you need to be spending more time with RCTA, and would that gap maybe be reached with adjusting our model? So I don't want to consider adjusting the model if the needs are being met, but if they're not being met, then it's worth consideration.
It's a good question. I guess I'll go first, Chuck. Because we have brought this up maybe about every year or two for the 4 years I've been here. I think it's improved, and a lot of that came when we did two things as an agency in the last couple of years that have effectively freed up more hours for me to manage our CTA. And that's been when we brought in first we took on the ad revenue program that generates money for our marketing hours. Because there was what we found the first couple of years here, and everyone was angry. Trust me, and we still have some problems with it. There was no hours left for marketing after doing all the other work, all the grant compliance crap, everything else we do. There was no money to do any marketing. So things improved when we got the ad revenue program launched and started to generate that. And that creates some hours that I can bill to that program instead of the all to admin. So that helped a lot. And then last year when we added this is our first fiscal year, so we're almost done with the year of it, but we added the CTSA program, and that's another one that some of my hours can be billed to. So those collectively have helped. It's better. That's a long answer to dance around the question. I think we could use a few more hours, but not to sound arrogant, but I don't think you're going to be better off with a full-time inexperienced transit manager than you are with like a half-time me. But that's that's what you got to think about. It's kind of full-time. Would you be able to get an experienced one to move up here? Maybe, but maybe not. So that's kind of the question. Chuck, anything you wanted to add on that from a contractor perspective? You got a really unique perspective on having to put up with me.
No, I think you covered it pretty well.
Okay. Well, that answers
That must be like.
Caught him off guard on that one, huh?
Don't comment,
question.
Chuck. You're ahead. You're ahead of the game.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're probably, unless I hear a change of heart from the group, we'll plan on continuing the model, and I'll get with, I'll contact Autumn and we'll talk about a timeline for getting the next RFP ready. I'm guessing we're going to want it to hit the street in the winter around the end of the year, something like that, so that it's either the choice of extending us or a new contract with someone else would be on your docket by like March or April.
Okay.
Oh, we touched up. We got more. We skipped this slide. We talked about it all.
Okay.
We'll skip that one. So then there's the second big contract that's a little further on the horizon, but it's important that you guys start to think about it. And we touched on it earlier, whereas we have a 5-year base contract with First Transit for calendar year 2017 through 2021. And it has 2 extension years available, but we've already seen firsthand that Caltrans will never allow an extension that has a wage intervention as part of it. They really hate that. So that's, the extension then wouldn't be an option if we want to do anything to change the, you know, the labor model here. So that leads us then towards just doing a new RFP for a new base contract then, which is, we would need to start work on that. Those procurements are some of the most involved in transit. So they take, you know, 3 or 4 months. So we would want to get on that. The first transit expires first transit contract expires December 31st. So we'd probably want to be out on the street with that RFP no later than say August or September of 2021. So we'd be working on that next summer. So we have that to look forward to. That'll probably involve 1 or 2 board members being part of a selection committee. We'll volunteer you guys, or you can just pick someone that's late to a meeting. But yeah, that'll be fun. It's a very important project, and luckily I've got a lot of experience with those. It was one of the things we did shortly after I came on board here. We did the first transit contract, and we had 3 bidders for that one. We did that in the fall of 16, and their new deal started on January of 17. So that's ahead of us and will be exciting. It's also an opportunity, as we get closer, we'll be looking at some details about changing our business model. If, for example, if we want to have an outside cleaning crew be a part of our team, that's the time to outline that and make sure everyone bids it the same and formalize it. And we already touched on the wages. So if they're in place, we are baseline that no one could bid under, so that will effectively get us towards where we want to be on the labor costs. I'm talking one ahead of my slides. What a horrible presenter. So yeah, we already touched on that. I think we heard some general support of trying to continue the crisis pay. We obviously don't need to, we're not deciding anything today, but that would help us then have a higher baseline for the new contract. And if it's all reimbursable, this seems like a great window to do that within. Any questions about either of the 2 contracts? Okay. All right, we're on the home stretch. What time we got? 5:53. Oh man, 7 minutes to get done in time at our target. This will go fast. Our technology has been our focus in the last 4 years. The board was loud and clear about wanting to see us catch up with the transit industry. And in many cases we have, not at all. The big bugaboo for us is, and the challenge with technology is, these are capital, in almost all cases, they're capital projects. They're toys that we want to equip on the buses and our computers in the office and stuff. And that's where we're most hurting for money. So that sucks. But in spite of that, we've done some things. We've done pretty well. Also with our lean managerial model, it really makes an even bigger role for technology to help me manage things from far away. That said, properly implementing a technology package still requires the time to deliver the project and then to monitor and use it, which is sometimes where we fall short on the AVL project, which is going pretty good, but I don't have enough time to play with it sometimes. So what we've done lately, this goes back to 2017. So as I just mentioned, we're cash poor on the capital side. So what the first 2 items that you see on the bullet list are 2 crowning achievement projects in the last few years, the Paratransit scheduling software and the double map AVL CAD fixed route software. Those were both brought to us as part of the contract. So what we did in 2016, when we did that last contract with First Transit, the RFP, we stated right in there that here's what we want: an AVL CAD system, and we want a Paratransit scheduling software system. So you bring it with you, being the proposers, bring it to the table and pledge it and include those costs in your operating costs. So what we effectively did is we took a capital expenditure and we operationalized it, just because we have no choice, because we're so choked on capital, just the position we're at in life right now here. So we were able to get these first 2 capital projects done without spending any capital. So that was about as good as you can do it, I guess. Third project, the video surveillance systems. We did use some of our old remaining Prop 1B Cal OES money to get every bus equipped with video systems. So that's been good. We have it was just before I came in, I think they used some older, even older Cal OES money to do the closed circuit camera system here at Williams Drive. It's in dispatch. And then we did the token transit mobile ticketing partnership. That one was basically, the capital was free because they recoup their funds by taking a percentage of sales. So by hook or crook, we're trying to catch up, which is made challenging by the lack of capital money. So this graphic just kind of shows how they all work together for the better rider experience. We're on Google Maps, Google Transit. We use Facebook currently as our main way of doing rider alerts when a trip is canceled or there's a weather-related delay or whatever. The double map AVL will become more and more our vehicle to update the public. So what's going to happen on that in the next year is we got to start marketing it so the riders all start using it more. Mainly this first year, we've been using it internally until we trust the data. And I'm at a point now where, I mean, it's not perfect. Chuck and I have been working on it, but it's generally pretty accurate. I think it's good enough to put out to the public. So we need to start the marketing phase of that to get folks to sign up. Within that, once you have the double map, you're on the app and you're on the website, it'll then send you alerts. Like you say, I'm a rider of Route 20, maybe I live in Klamath or whatnot. I can just sign up for Route 20 alerts and it'll just send me those, but it won't bother me with something going on the 199 or something going on in Crescent City. So that's, we're barely scratching the surface of what that can do. Our CTS scheduling software for dial-a ride's been working really good. Staff loves it. They've been using it now for 3 years. The low floor buses that we procure are more expensive than the high floor buses. We just heard, in fact, one of the new drivers I talked to this afternoon was just crowing about the low floor buses and how important it is and how he so much likes driving them better because it doesn't take long. The kneeling and dealing with the wheelchairs is so much more efficient and quick. So things we're doing are working pretty good. We've come a long ways. What's next, I guess, is the question. So here's some potential future projects that we might be able to do if we can put together the time, energy, and funding. The top one relates to the electric bus project that we put together at Caltrans direction. While we haven't committed to electric yet, because there's still there's a hydrogen option out there that there's actually a study going on down in Humboldt that we've been participating in just on the perimeter, but they are looking at possibly hydrogen powered buses, because one of the limitations with electric now is power, hill climbing, and distance, all of which would impact our regional stuff. So the electric buses might indeed be a great solution for our local stuff, but they might not be the best technology for the Arcata route. So we need to keep our eyes open for other alternatives there. As I mentioned, I won't be redundant, but yeah, we need to better promote our double map AVL so that more people download the app, more people bookmark the desktop website and sign up for the rider alerts so we can push out information in a hurry when something happens in real time. We do need to, there's a level above where we're at on our Google Maps stuff now. It's called Real-Time GTFS Plus. I don't know how to do it yet, but I've joined a consortium that's been talking about it. And it sounds like Caltrans might even hire a consultant to provide assistance because it's going to need to interface with our AVO CAD data from Double Map in order to, because what this does is Google Maps just gives you the time the bus is supposed to be there. But if the bus is late, it doesn't tell you that. So this is taken to another level and letting you know when the bus will really get there. So we'll be working on that. I think it's eventually going to be a mandate, but we want to get ahead of that. As we and if we develop more of a transit center anywhere in town, but we can add, one thing we can add is electronic signage for folks that are standing around wondering where the bus is and they're already there, that interfaces with the AVL and lets the passengers know how many minutes till the bus is going to get there. That would be ideal, for example, at a cultural center. Or like at Walmart. Other busy stops mid-route, it actually works really well too. At the high school would be good, high school, college. future, it's very likely we're moving towards, we as an industry are moving towards accepting of debit cards and credit cards at the fare box, which would open things up even more. That would be another huge step. So folks that didn't have any cash wouldn't have to worry about the exact change. They could just pay for their fare and get on board. What suggestions do you guys have? Are there any technologies that we haven't implemented yet? Like for example, Wi-Fi is not on here. I'm not sure. I guess it was an omission on my part, but we've looked into it a little, and I have experience. I've delivered it at my other properties. We just haven't.
No.
It's a
Joe, did we
capital money issue, so we haven't done it yet here.
Joe, did we discuss any advertising protocols in this report, including electronic signage on the back of our buses? Is that something we've looked into, or is it?
No, I don't think I have. No. You're thinking so there'd be like variable message, like you
that's
see at the ballpark?
Yeah, that's the technology. I mean, you don't
Okay.
put a physical sign up there anymore. You get a board, one of those electronic boards, and you have the ads on there. You know, that's the way the technology's going.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. That's a great idea. Let me look into
And
that.
we have, and again, just on this, and we haven't really discussed the revenues derived from this, but you've got 3 sides of the bus, actually 4, if you use the front, but I'm not sure that's going to obfuscate driver's view. But you could put up to 3 screens on there programmed, and then we don't have to worry about setting up signage. You know, just here's your ad, and you have it on. They can buy a bus and have 3 sides of it, or just the back, or just the side. You know, there's a lot of ways to go on this. I think it's so hard to make decisions in this COVID era, but I think when things come back to a new normal, the idea of this kind of advertising will be a part of our ongoing revenue stream.
Yeah, let me look into that. It's a great point. Yep.
Roger.
I see those to be like behind home plate, and it's like, yeah, wouldn't that be great to have on the tail of the bus? So let me see if the equipment's there. If anyone's doing that, I'll look into it.
Roger, you meant screens outside the bus or on the interiors of the buses?
No. There's not it's outside the bus. The bus is moving about the community, and you're looking at the bus because that's what you do. You see something, and then there's an ad that pops up.
Yeah, I've seen it.
Now you may have a split second with the ad, or a few seconds, but inside the bus you have the same people looking at it. I don't think that's really an answer. Is inside the bus. I think the potential is outside the bus of the public looking at the vehicle.
Makes a lot more sense. Thank
Okay.
you.
I mean, that's how I see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good one. Any other ideas for technologies they want to see us look at?
Nothing that's coming to mind.
Just the Wi-Fi on board. I know that the manager of US Cellular here in Crescent City is interested in talking to you about that.
Okay. I'll give them a call. Yeah, I'd like to see what they could do for us. It sounds like they have some of the best coverage for us. And that's what it really comes down to. Yeah, I'll keep that going. It's on our list. It's just, we've been kind of busy with this stuff, and it does require about $1,000 per bus in capital for the cradle points for the routers. But really, that's pretty cheap in the long run. It's just for us right now, the capital money's tight. But yeah, I'll look into that. I'll reach. Do you know his name or?
His name is Alex. I can't remember his last name.
Okay, I'll give him a call. Alex.
It's just if you know you want to attract a younger crowd, you give them Wi-Fi, and you give them.
That. Yeah, I will go to the Wi-Fi.
Well, this is not a this community is not a transit place. It's just not, you know. So it's retraining the youth of this community that they can get around and have some independence. So I think if you offered them Wi-Fi, that's gonna be one more incentive to increase ridership. And the other thing is It's exactly that. You want to improve their experience. And if you can in real time show where a bus is at, it's definitely gonna help improve that experience.
I agree. Well, let's get that Wi-Fi project a little more energized and get some quotes from Alex on the operating costs, because you have to pay for the monthly data. And then I can get in touch with Cradle Point and get some quotes on the actual routers, and then we can bring that back to you in a meeting or two, and we can look at it. Maybe we could do something even later this year on that project. We just have to identify the funding, but it would be great. I agree. It totally goes lockstep with our student promoting the students. Yeah. Anything else?
Doesn't seem like it.
Okay. I think that reaches I think we reached the end. Oh, okay. So we do have one budget. Last item of today's work session is just our first look at the budget. And this is as draft can get, because so many of these numbers are wildly speculative. But if you give me 2 minutes, I'll walk you through it real quick. The fares, we're assuming they're coming in a little light this year. We assume they stay a little light next year, but this is just based on actuals. So the yellow column in the middle is actuals extrapolated from the first 9 months, but these last 3 months are going to, I also had to do a downer on them because the last 3 months is going to be very low. The first 9 months, first 8 months especially, were very normal. What we did, we assumed the STA money is down about 25%. That's what I'm hearing. It's kind of the best guess right now is like a 25% loss in these economic related funds. This one here is not. The Prop 1B, this is just our carryover balance from the prior years. So I think I need to fix this. No, it's still in there because the new buses haven't been spent yet. I got to check this number. It's probably not ready for prime time. We have 60,000 in the LC top to continue the fare free program. That does not include the electric bus because we won't spend anything on that this next year. We need to get the, oh, I didn't crow about that yet. Glad I didn't forget that. We were fortunate in that, so one of the caveats that just kills me with Caltrans, they force us into a new project, the electric bus project. And then we tell them we're half a person out here. Come on now. And then they tell us, oh, but you can't use the money for planning or engineering. So just installation, purchase of equipment, installation, basically construction phase, quote unquote, of the project. It's like, what the? So that left us in a spot. It's like, okay, we'll take this money. We'll have to bank it for 2 or 3 years anyway, probably in order to do anything. But in the meantime, we still got to find some planning money or some consultant help to start figuring out what we want to do in the next year. So luckily we applied. Dan wrote a little grant application to the Community Transit Association of America, CTAA. They have like a new transit technology assistance program. And we were awarded one of 5 projects in the US. We got awarded some free consulting help to do the planning phase of this electrification project. So we had a couple phone calls with them. They congratulated us. We have a kickoff meeting in a couple weeks. So I should have a little bit more to report on it when we get together again in June. But that's good news. So that'll give us hopefully all the planning we need, or most of it, for free. That sets up then the later LC top for the bus electrification project. Sorry if I forgot to crow about that earlier, but congrats to Dan. Dan writes a mean grant, if you know what I mean. Okay, finishing up here. Yeah, we'll refine these numbers, but the good news is the bottom line I wanted to point your attention to is, it's called right here, CARES Act operating. It's this section 5311 CARES Act operating. We're going to get 150,000 right away this summer, which is basically for the fiscal year that we're suffering through right now, the end of it. And then the rest of the allocation of 400,000, which is $250,000, we went ahead and put in next year's budget. it could be stretched out even for the year after that. But with that in place, it shows even with the downfall in fares, the downfall in our TDA money, which I cut from 620 to 480. So that's about a 25% drop. Even with that, the CARES Act money puts us in the positive. So this shows us actually building the reserves even more. Now, granted, there's a million variables between now and then, but it's reassuring that we're probably going to be okay, at least for a year or two, with the CARES Act money coming to backfill our lost TDA. But it all really comes down to how fast the economy comes back. Any questions on the preliminary budget? This will be on your agenda for an action item in 3 weeks, June 22nd.
So column 3, the fiscal year 2021 draft budget, basically somewhere in between. The math that you're doing is somewhere in between the adopted budget and the projected revenue expenses budget. That's how I'm reading it. I'm just thinking out loud.
Yeah.
Sometimes lower, but generally somewhere.
Yeah.
Kind of those two.
Yeah, it's lowered. It's more a lower version of the left-hand column, the adopted budget. But yeah, it does sort of jive with the projected. So we see the STA money diminished down a bit, the TDA down by about 140,000. It's kind of like that. You're right.
Okay.
As far as capital projects that are in there, if I can get this dang thing to scroll down. What we budgeted for this year for capital projects, we've been a notice of award on 3 different grants through the feds, 2 of which are 5339 and 1 of which is 5310. The 5339 money is so excruciatingly slow. But we put it in there in case the stars align and Caltrans actually gets the agreements processed and sent to us so we can start the projects. The 5310 money, though, has a good reputation for being much quicker to be dispersed. So that's here, so that's in there. And so I have more confidence that we'll actually be able to order these 2 buses for the 240. I think we'll be able to order those probably before the larger order. We've got another of our $38,000 annual SB1 state of good repair allocations for bus stop improvements. On the docket in 3 weeks is going to be a PO for some bus stop amenities. So we're going to spend this year's, which we just been real busy with the COVID and all. We'll get that encumbered in June, but then this will be for next year's batch so we can continue to improve our bus stops. And setting aside 20,000 for the yard or miscellaneous. We have an electrical code door lighting project here and a chance to upgrade our yard lights to LED. So I put a little bit of money in there for that. But other than that, it's a pretty conservative budget considering what we're facing.
Okay.
Any questions?
Nope.
All right, well, thank you for your patience. Sorry we ran a little long.
Jonah, you have another meeting. Do I have something on my calendar for June 8th, or was that just an alternative date for this meeting?
I think that must have been an alternative date for this meeting because, yeah, no, we don't have anything on June 8th. Our next meeting is back to our normal Monday afternoon, and that would be June 22nd, I believe.
Right. Now, what do you anticipate through the summer months? Are we meeting now monthly now? Is that how it's working? Usually we have about 6-7 meetings a year.
Yeah, I think we stick with the 6 or 7. I think if we meet in June, we'll meet twice in 3 weeks. I think we'll be good. We may not have to meet again either July or August. Maybe July just to approve the service change, then skip August. But one of those, either July or August, we should be able to take off. And then probably every other month again after that.
Yeah, because there are a lot of changing dynamics with this virus, and I don't want to preclude a meeting, but at the same time, I know we have budget we have to adhere to.
Yeah, and one thing, it's interesting. We for many years we talked about doing these Zoom meetings, to save on some of my travel costs. But now that we realize that they're pretty easy and we got forced to do them. We might be able to even meet maybe more like 8 times, but maybe a couple of them can be Zooms. So,
okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for the update.
There.
We adjourned or are we done?
I think we covered everything on the agenda. Any announcements or anything at the bottom of the agenda?
Could you
Anybody
stop
got anything?
sharing, Joe? So I could, I can't access the agenda. I could look at the last items and get us
Okay,
through those.
sorry about that.
It's okay.
I think we got it here. If I can. Back to the front, okay. That's what I get for not having a paper copy today. Oops.
Okay, well.
Okay, here it is. So yeah, we touched on the budget. Now it's announcements and adjournment.
Yeah,
Okay.
it sounds like if there's no announcements from any board members or staff, which I'm not seeing, then yeah, we can adjourn till 6:22.
Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a
Thanks,
good
thanks for
Thank you.
spending Friday afternoon with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. You all have a good weekend.
You too.
You too.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.